I know you've been enjoying the tour of the church, and there may be more spaces yet to show you, but for the time being, I thought I would show you a little bit from the annals of the history of things that didn't end up happening at the church, but were aspirations of the church as it was built. I know that there was feedback that I got on the video I did concerning the stained glass windows, and the curiosity by this individual of why there wasn't stained glass throughout the sanctuary, and that video helping to illuminate some of the reason, that being that funding was simply limited, and there was a need to be more creative as the conclusion of that building project occurred. So as that final sanctuary was envisioned and built, it was a hope of Glen Aldy Crafts and the church to have a statue hang on the exterior of the brick of the church. So that is the large brick wall that faces Harlem Road. And that statue was going to be a statue of a Christ figure. And they had gone through some work with a sculptor and even had some preliminary sculptures in relation to that were about half the size of what the final product was hoped to be. And I think you can see it there. So this, if I understand correctly, was a mock-up that was done, and it was about half the size, so it was about 6 feet. And the hope was that the one that would be created to hang there permanently would be about 12 feet from top to bottom in size, so quite a significant statue. Now, what's interesting is I did a little research into the artist who happened to have died. So while it was sketched and revised, by the time that this photo from our archives is there, which is a photo that was from work that he had done, it was written to his late wife, who by this point in time had also died. But it was written to her in the hopes that this work still might be seen through. What happened after that, I'm going to get back to the artist in a minute, is it was the hopes that another artist could be commissioned to complete his work. And the cost of that ended up being prohibitive enough that this was abandoned in place of the plain cross that does currently hang on the exterior of the building. But it was the hope of Glen Aldy Crafts that this would be one of the marquee elements of that sanctuary of Christ Church when it was envisioned and built. Now the artist, I did a little research on the artist, and it's a very interesting fellow. His name is William Ehrich, and he was born in Prussia and immigrated after World War I. He had been in a camp, a prisoner camp in Russia, where he had sculpted mainly heads of officers of the Russian army before he managed to immigrate to the United States. And where did he end up immigrating to? Well, Buffalo, largely. And his work can be seen in and around Buffalo. Some of his sculptures still exist at the zoo, at the Buffalo Zoo. There is also some of his work that is in the Birchfield Penny, and some, I believe, that is at the Albright Knox, which is currently closed. Well, all those places are currently closed. So he became somebody that was quite renowned, and in some ways his work started in a very small fashion as a local person named Pitt Petrie. There used to be a store that sold goods, recognized his craft and asked him if he would make these small animals that he had been carving into an ongoing thing that could be sold in that store. And so he cast in ceramic and ended up having a lot of popularity out of these small figurines that he created for Pitt Petrie, which encouraged his craft and the development of his craft. Eventually, after he taught for some time here in Buffalo, so he taught at the Buffalo Art College, I believe it was called. Hold on, let me make sure that I have that correct. I know that where he spent the bulk of his kind of professional work developing others was at the University of Rochester, and he ended up creating a studio there where he had a foundry and did work related to his sculpting. So he was somebody that was well known. He had a lot of sculptures around the world. His work was well known. So I'm sure that the commission of this at the time was a very significant piece of art to consider hanging and having on display. So the fact that the church had gone through the process of saying that it was committed to have this piece of art and wanted to see it into fruition. Unfortunately, it was thwarted first by his death, which was in 1960, I did find that, and then the death of his wife in 1962. So they were desperately trying to get a hold of his wife. This is from 1967 as I had it, and there had not been correspondence in some time, and so that ended up essentially sinking the project. They tried seeing if another artist would take up the project, but it required the additional cost of sort of restarting the project, and that just became prohibitive. But very interesting that a really prominent modern artist had been commissioned to do something significant in size as well, that had local roots and local ties, not directly to Christchurch, but locally within the Buffalo area and in Rochester. But unfortunately never got seen through to be one of the marquee features of Christchurch. So a plain cross hangs instead on that exterior wall. And there is more about this sculpture in the archives, and I'm going to dig around a little more and see if I can't find some of the other information that you may be interested in. But this was very curious to me. I thought this was something that was desired on the inside of the sanctuary. And it's not the inside, it's the exterior wall of the sanctuary. And again, 12 feet. Think of how large 12 feet is. So that certainly would have been something that would have been very visible to anybody who would have passed by. And based on the artist, would have been something probably that would have been a destination for people on architecture tours and art tours. So, learning something else about Christchurch that you probably never knew because it never came to be, but this commissioned sculpture that was the hope of the church to hang on the exterior wall. So, now you know a little more.